Passenger ferries are just one of the many ways that ships can play an important part in our lives. The ability of these boats to navigate has been greatly improved over the past 50 years. To learn more, we spoke with Les Cutler, a recently retired ferryboat captain.
I started work back in early 1960, and then up until I went master then, or captain, in 1968. Yeah, when my father was the ship's master, and when I was in high school, that I would go with him on the summer months, and that was, I guess, my introduction to working on board of the vessels, on board the boats. I started off on the Eric Keefe, and then I went to work after I finished school on the Isabel Suzanne. The Eric Keefe was a two-masted schooner. She was a fishing schooner, but when Dad bought her, he converted her into a cargo schooner, and we would coast coal from North Sydney anywhere along the southwest coast. We operated our coastline would have been from Port aux Basques down to ports in Placentia Bay. Primarily, the last port in Placentia Bay we went to was Marachine Islands, and that was just prior to its resettlement. Most of our operation at that time was done by what we called dead reckoning, and your two prime pieces of navigational equipment would have been your compass, which was a magnetic compass, and your clock. You needed your clock, and you tabulated your time, speed, to get distance and whatever. So it was pretty well all dead reckoning, and you had to watch things very close, because there was nothing you couldn't look on an electronic chart and say, well, we're going off course, we'll check it, because it was all up to you.
Dead reckoning was a way to place yourself on a map using three pieces of information. First, you needed a starting point that was fixed on the map. Second, you needed the direction you were heading. Lastly, you needed to know how long you were on that heading. As you can imagine, this type of navigation was not perfect. In bad weather, it would be difficult to know how much the wind and waves were affecting the direction you were headed. If you were not able to account for these forces, it was possible to drift off course. This was always a real threat.
Now, the schooner that we had, Dad lost her up on West Point Shoals. He was coming in with a load of coal, and they got a bit off course, and they lost her with a load of coal on board, but all hands got off safely.
When navigating using dead reckoning, there was always a chance that you might go off course. This is why finding a new fixed point on the map was so important. If you could see the shore or a landmark, even for a brief moment, and recognize where you were, you could place yourself on the map and see if you were on the course you thought you were. Obviously, if you were off course, you could chart a new one. The most important landmark for sailors was the lighthouse.
The lighthouse was very important, as most of your navigation was done through dead reckoning, and in good visibilities, you would be watching for the light, and the light on that lighthouse was flashing a signal. So many seconds flash on, so many seconds flashed off, and from your local knowledge, and then from the notices that you had received and picked up over the years, you knew what that particular lighthouse was sending out. So you would watch, and if that was the one that you were looking for, then you knew that you had a light on Channel Head. That would have been the first one we would have picked up coming across from North Sydney. Then you knew then from the angle that it was on your broadside that, well, we're keeping a little bit too much to the port, a little bit too much to the starboard. And then after that, you'll watch for the light, say, on Rose Blanche. But then as you got down, you would pick up the lights, and each one had a different characteristic. And that's how you identify the light, by the number of flashes the light was on, the seconds the light was on, and the seconds it was out.
That is an interesting point. You may have seen many lighthouses either in person or in pictures. They are all a little different. That is because from a distance in difficult visibility conditions, it is important to be able to identify which lighthouse you are looking at.
That's right. This is why it's important to know the characteristics of each one. And some lighthouses were just a tower, Some more lighthouses, even like the one on Cape Bonavista, is of a different structure. So yeah, you were watching for the shape of a lighthouse. Some of them had the red and white spiral going around. Some more didn't. So you had to know this was known mostly through local knowledge.
One technology that many people probably think is outdated is using a sextant to navigate by the stars. But was this 300-year-old piece of technology still in use in the 20th century?
Oh yes, yes. It was mandatory if you were going overseas. If you were going out into the Atlantic, then that was mandatory to have a sextant on board. But the type of vessel that we had, it wasn't mandatory. It wasn't compulsory to carry the sextant.
Compasses, sextants, and lighthouses are all very old technologies, but there are many new technologies on the way.
Well, the first thing that we saw was a direction finder. Dad bought a ship-to-shore radio, and that ship-to-shore radio had a receiver onto it for what we call a DF, a direction finder. And you could pick up a signal that was being transmitted from Channel Head, Port aux Basques, or down on Ramia, and then over on St. Pierre. Because what would happen, you would get a signal from one of these three, I'll say one of these three, there was hundreds around the different coastlines, but that would have been our three primary ones. So you would get the signal, you would put that on your chart, and you would draw the line from the angle that you actually picked it up from, and then where these three lines would cross, or if you only got two lines, but if you had three lines, then you would put yourself in a little better position. So that was our first piece of modern equipment, I guess you'd call it, that we had was a direction finder. No doubt the direction finders were used a lot by the larger ships, but in our particular case, it was something fairly new to us.
The direction finder using radio waves was a major advancement in navigation technology. No longer were ships required to be able to see landmarks in order to determine where they were. Instead, they could rely on radio signals from faraway transmitters. So what was next after the direction finder?
After that, we purchased a radar. And now the radar was a big plus for us. As you know, on the southwest coast, there was always a considerable amount of fog, and there's a lot of boats in the area at all times. So the radar was a major step upwards for us. We probably had the radar in 68, 69, that they had the first radar. And again, it was quite a piece of equipment to get used to. And but once we did, that was a big asset to the navigation. It was a big comfort, like when you were in the Gulf, that was those large ships coming in and out. You could pick up these ships, you would get their bearing and their distance from you, and you could tell then if you were going to be in a collision, or if you needed to halt your course, or what the case might be. And when you got over on the coastline, as you got in so close, you would get a picture of the shoreline, and then through your local knowledge and your charts, that you would determine what that shoreline was. But it was anything that was above the surface. After radar, the Lorraine C and the Dicker Navigator would have come in, but now we didn't have either of these, not on when we were coasting. But as we went into the ferry services, latter years, we did have a Lorraine C, and again you would pick up your signals and plot that on your chart and get your positions and lats and longs from that.
The term LORAN is an acronym made up of Long Range Navigation. The letter C denoted that the system was a new version of the LORAN A and LORAN B systems. The system was an improvement on the radio signals used by the direction finder due to the extra information included in the signals. Here is an interesting fact. The LORAN C Tower on Cape Race on the Avalon Peninsula was the tallest structure in Canada until the construction of the CN Tower. After the Lorentz system, the next big advancement was a system that most people are familiar with.
They gave us the GPS, and the GPS was a big asset to us, as it was a much more reliable reading, as you just take your readouts off your readout and plot that to your charts, and you could really, pinpoint where you were much more accurately and much more quickly and efficiently.
There is a common theme with all the new technology we have discussed. They were all developed by the military. There are many important technologies that have made the jump from military to civilian use, but with navigation being critically important to military strategy, this is definitely a field where the military has taken the lead. This has had a very important side effect on our daily lives. Ships do not sink with the regularity they once did.
The biggest difference would be because of the navigational aids that we have, that the dead reckonings would see you go on the shorelines much more readily than what your electronic charts and that will do, and that would be the big thing. The improvement in the navigational systems have certainly reduced the number of accidents. For the most part, I think the accidents and the sinkings and the loss of ships and lives is maybe an improvement of 90% or more anyway. So it is a big difference in the accidents and the loss of ships now today and what it was then.
Given the major role that ships play in our lives, few things have had the positive effect as the advancements in navigation technology.